Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. If you could speak to God while in this life, what would you ask him? Most likely, most of us would ask him about something that happened in our life and why it was allowed to happen. Was it because something I did was wrong or right? Or was there some other purpose? And yet, God doesn't need to give us an answer for those things. There's a hymn that is sometimes sung in church that I have been considering the lyrics to, and have come to the conclusion that it's not entirely correct. The hymn is Farther Along by W.B. Stevens. The chorus goes, farther along we'll know all about it, farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, don't worry, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. The idea of the song is meant to cheer up people who are suffering and telling them to keep their faith in God, a good sentiment. But God has never promised to explain to us everything when we get to heaven. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. If he doesn't, does that mean I will not want to be there? Not in the slightest. At the end of chapter 13, Job is praying to God, and he desires for God to give him an explanation for his suffering. His friends say it's because of sin. Is it? And if not, why? Let's examine this prayer by reading the end of Job 13. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to the book of Job to chapter 13. We're going to be reading from verses 20 to 28. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Job chapter 13, beginning at verse 20. Only two things do not do to me, then I will not hide myself from you. Withdraw your hand far from me, and let not the dread of you make me afraid. Then call, and I will answer. Oh, let me speak then. You respond to me. How many are my iniquities and sins? Make me know my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face and regard me as your enemy? Will you frighten a leaf driven to and fro? And will you pursue dry stubble? For you write bitter things against me and make me inherit the iniquities of my youth. You put my feet in the stocks and watch closely all my paths. You set a limit for the soles of my feet. Man decays like a rotten thing, like a garment that is moth-eaten. Job is wanting an audience with God to discuss his suffering. However, in his present condition, he would be unable to do so. He is in immense suffering, and as such feels that he would not be able to stand before God to say anything, let alone defend himself. Therefore, he asks God to withdraw his hand from him, stop his physical suffering, and let not the dread of him make Job afraid, stop the mental anguish he was going through as well. If God would do this, then Job would call and God would answer, or Job would speak and God would respond. Now, this is a little bit arrogant on Job's part, to not only think he was worthy to stand before God and demand an answer, but to think that God was obliged to answer him. Job has correctly stated that God's ways are higher than our ways. His doings really can't be questioned. However, his friends are accusing him of sin, and grievous sin at that. He didn't believe he was a sinner, but if he was, he wanted God to give him a list of his sins. Was it a lie that he told? Did he steal from someone? Did he commit adultery against his wife, blaspheme the name of God? Or was he being punished for some indiscretion from his youth, recognizing that there is no statute of limitations with God for unforgiven sin? His friends couldn't seem to outline his sin. Certainly God could, though, if Job was being punished for his sin. Now, of course, based on what we've read thus far, I don't believe that Job thought God would outline any sin in him, for Job didn't believe his suffering was because of sin. But if it was, then he was certain God could tell him what it was so that he could repent. Short of that, though, Job wanted to know why God was hiding his face from him and regarding him as an enemy. He doesn't frighten the leaf being tossed to and fro, or pursue dry stubble, taking vengeance on them for blowing in the wind. Why then was God punishing Job? Why did God fasten Job's feet in a stock, watch closely all Job's paths, set a limit on the soles of Job's feet? For after all, man decays like a rotten thing and a garment that is moth-eaten. It will die one day anyways. Why was God setting himself up against Job this way? And in this, based on Job's view that everything that happens is because God caused it to happen, I can understand Job's question. Why did you choose to treat me this way? Was there some master plan that you had envisioned? Was it something that I had done? Or is it simply because you decided to? The problem with this is twofold. One, it assumes that God is the cause of Job's suffering, which he wasn't. And two, even if God was the cause of Job's suffering, it assumes that Job deserved an answer. Sometimes we think we're entitled to things, and in this earth, we sometimes are. If we pay into a pension plan, we're entitled to a pension when we retire because we paid into it. If we didn't pay in, then we're not entitled to it, even though others get it. It doesn't work that way with God because we're not the creator, we're the created. We didn't pay God anything that deserves him to provide us anything. It is because he decided to extend us his grace that we can be saved at all. Yes, he puts conditions on receiving that grace, but that doesn't entitle us to salvation. It simply graciously allows us to receive the gift that God provides, eternal salvation. We're still unprofitable servants, having just done what was our duty to do. We are also not entitled to be given God's reasoning as to why he does or does not do certain things, or why he allows or doesn't allow some things to happen. It's hubris on man's part to think that we do. Ironically, Job will get his audience with God later in this book, but that audience will not go the way he described it here. God will put Job in his proper place, and in the end won't answer his question about why Job was allowed to suffer. Job was not entitled to that answer. He did not need to know that answer in order to follow God, and so God chose not to give him that answer. We are given that answer in the book of Job. Why? Because God chose to give us that answer in order to teach us a broader lesson, that we too can follow God in faith without being given all the answers. What God supplies us is sufficient for our salvation. We can either accept that and be saved or not, and not obey that and be lost. The choice is up to us. Job is not done speaking, though, so we will continue on with his speech, Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Job chapter 14, verses 1 to 12, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.